The National Investment Funds Bill tabled in Parliament on Wednesday. Replacing the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the new bill will allow the Bahamas to maximize the country's assets by investing and deploying capital, thereby easing the reliance on traditional funding sources.
Consider public-private partnerships. If we only finance projects with government revenues or borrowings, fiscal constraints will significantly limit how much and how ambitiously we can build. Partnering with the private sector greatly expands the number and scope of infrastructure projects we can take on, allowing us to move forward on more projects on more islands simultaneously. Mobilizing private capital in partnership with government is the most effective way to see significant advancement in expensive projects. Instead of the public having to contribute or borrow every penny for roads, schools, hospitals, airports, and homes, we will invite the private sector to partner with us.
The bill sets up for the first time a clear regulatory framework for the arrangement, the recommendation of the Inter-American Development Bank.
We are doing so in line with the recommendations made by the IDB, which advise setting up investment funds and vehicles to deal with national investment revenue and expenditure in a way that is transparent and in line both from a structuring and governance point of view with international best practices. This is an essential first step in taking a comprehensive approach to national investment.
The bill will facilitate the management of natural resources along with private investments held by the government and the establishment of the National Investment Fund to advance the blue, green, and orange economies. Passage of the bill will be followed by a Bahamas Resilient Infrastructure Fund to include food security and renewable energy sub-funds along with a Family Island Growth Fund.
The vision for the Bahamas Resilient Infrastructure Fund is much larger than our basic infrastructure needs. It will be a vehicle to promote private capital mobilization to advance the country and our family of islands like never before.
Keeping you in the know. This is OPM Press Now.
Well, COP is one of the largest global events that are happening, and it happens once a year. And all countries who have a vested interest in what's going on as it relates to climate change participate in the COP. And of course, we know in the Bahamas, we are very much interested in what goes on as it relates to climate change because of the environmental factors that we face due to issues such as hurricanes, flooding, droughts. And these things, while they are global, we as a nation contribute very little or not at all to the issues that affect them. So it's very important for us to meet with our partners, our developed partners who contribute a lot to the greenhouse gas emissions that cause it. 3.4 billion is what we suffered in Dorian. We can't do another Dorian. This year we can't do another Dorian in 5 years because we're still reeling from that and trying to recuperate from that. And that presents a lot of environmental challenges. And if we wrap all that up into what's going on in the global economic markets, it's a spiraling effect, right? So COP allows for us to go and have these discussions on how we deal with the issues of loss and damage. There has been a significant shift in the response of our partners. We are seeing that Germany and the US are demanding our multilateral development banks, such as the World Bank, to come back within a matter of months with a new platform to deal with concessionary loans and concessionary financing. Why is that important? Because when we suffer a $3.4 billion impact in finance due to damage, we don't have $3.4 billion sitting around in the bank. That means we have to go out and we have to borrow. If we allow our partners to come to the point where they have an understanding and there's an agreement that, okay, in the normal vein of things, if you go into the bank and get a loan and the loan was at a 28 or 16%, if it's a climate-related disaster, that same loan will be considered under a 5% interest rate. And these are just numbers I'm using as an example to give a point of reference. And so if we have a 5% rate on the loan, that's an easier ask, an easier thing for us to do in terms of our own fiscal budgets.
Keeping you in the know, this is OPM Press Now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley, and welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister. It's so good to see all of you this week. Today, we are very happy to engage reporters who are present here on the very critical issue of climate change. Right now, Press Secretary Clint Watson will take to the podium, and he will, of course, give further details on the interventions that are being made on behalf of the Bahamas on this issue and reintroduce you to some of the key players who will be speaking on behalf of the Bahamas. Clint?
Keisha, thank you. And good afternoon to everybody. We're not used to doing it this late in the afternoon. And those of you joining us live, thank you for being here for our press briefing. It's all right, somebody's phone's going off. A couple of things we want to handle today. And of course, we want to talk about the upcoming COP conference, COP27, which begins following week. Next week, our team leaves. Our delegation also, our technical advisors will leave this evening. And so Director Rochelle Newbold, who's responsible as climate change advisor here in the Office of the Prime Minister, will talk to us today about what is it the Bahamas is going to talk about and what is it the Bahamas is looking forward to doing while we're at COP27, why that is important to you, the Bahamian people. And of course, we have some people, a delegation who's going from the private sector as well, from our youth organization as well, who are all a part of this and the significance of this. And they'll be talking, some of their representatives here talk to us today about that. And then I have, of course, some announcements to pass on to you from Prime Minister, and then take your questions. And then we have a congratulatory statement to make today for one of our young people. And then our, indeed, vendor of the day, which I'm sure all of you will be quite pleased and happy to have sharing with us. So quite a bit to get to today, and we're happy to report these matters to you. So without any further ado, I'm going to advise Rochelle Newbold, a climate change advisor here in the Office of the Prime Minister, to come and deal with this segment and introduce to you the speakers who will be talking to you about COP27.
Thank you, Clint. Well, we've been talking about it for months, and now that day is fast approaching. The Bahamas is going to COP, and the Bahamas will be going with a most comprehensive list of delegates, such that we will be able to deal with this matter on every conceivable front. During the COP, we will have members of civil society Bahamas who will be there. We will have members from the NGO community. We will have representation from the private sector, as well as we will have our youth delegates that are there. This COP is unique and it's historical in that the representation level is, like I said, very comprehensive, very diverse. We have yet to go forward with a solution. And I think next week you guys are going to be hearing a bit of it more in depth. But I want to tell you that the small nations such as ours, being the one that has, we always are the first in many fronts, we will be offering a technology to the world to help deal with the issues of climate change. And I'm going to leave that there, leave that cliffhanger there. But I also want to say that we are also a nation that is the first to have an organization accredited under the UNFCCC for the English-speaking Caribbean region. That was a fight, as is often it is for anything that we seek to achieve, and I am glad to present to you today Ms. Karen Panton from the Bahamas Protected Areas Fund, who will speak on behalf of that organization and speak to what that organization will bring to us and afford us because of this very global accreditation process. I yield the mic to Ms. Panton.
Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies. I had a slight accident earlier and has caused me to be a little behind, as I mentioned to Director Newbold. But I want to say first thank you to Director Newbold, the Office of the Prime Minister, and to say hello to the Bahamas at this time. The Bahamas, I bring you greetings on behalf of my board of directors, and I want to say to you what a pleasure, an absolute pleasure it is. And if y'all would just give me just 1 minute, I will tell you what we have to say. We're excited. Someone said to me that I should look more excited than I actually seem. And, and I want to say this goes without saying, that it is a massive achievement. I want to say thank you to SPA Newbold, because if it had not been for her, we certainly would not have had the privilege of being here today as a UNFCCC NGO accredited to attend COP. We are delighted to be able to add this extra dimension as part of a group of global NGOs to join calls for climate justice, as championed by Prime Minister Davis and other leaders within the Caribbean and throughout developing nations. We see this status as a strategic move that complements national efforts to access funding, flows needed for environmental impact, for livelihoods, and for our future. Securing access to COP is an important benchmark in a series of deliberate steps by BPAF to attract increasing levels of international funding from mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, philanthropic organizations, and the private sector. As we maintain, the Bahamas has always been a leader regionally as it relates to environmental stewardship, but we have lacked access to the associated funding and sustainably manage our natural resources in a manner that counteracts the demands of development, overharvesting, excessive exploitation, and increasingly and exponentially the effects of climate change. It is a tool. We want to say that the status is a tool for us as a national entity to form those alliances that will expand the available technical expertise and support required to transition to a clean energy, create green jobs, foster innovations within our tourism sector, and hopefully a new and a sustainable future born out of the collective wisdom and contributions of all Bahamians. BPAF will use this status to support our country's commitment to tangible actions that support the global goal to confront the climate crisis, to secure global net zero emissions by mid-century and keep 1.5 degrees within reach. Climate change is creating an unparalleled havoc globally, but especially for low-lying islands like the Bahamas. Hurricane Dorian was an eye-opener for all Bahamians. Many dead, hundreds missing, thousands displaced, and billions in economic losses and damages. BPAF has been strategic and very deliberate in our response to these events, creating value for our partners and throughout the Bahamas. Reducing emissions alone cannot adequately abate climate change. We must invest in nature and nature-based solutions that protect critical biodiversity and stabilize our climate. BPAF has been working, I promise you I'm almost done. BPAF has been working with a number of governmental and partner agencies since Dorian on environmental assessments and recovery on Abaco and Grand Bahama. We have financed coastal ecosystems assessments and recovery, the establishment of seed banks for native plants, the implementation of solar systems, groundwater regeneration, supported the response to the deadly stony coral tissue loss disease, the restoration of national parks, the removal of invasive species, and a green waste to renewable fuels workshop, and more recently, with the Bahamas Vocational and Technical Institute and the Jeff Small Grants Program, a series of grants training sessions to build the capacity of local actors to develop fundable projects that can finance their programmatic work plans. Our observer status at UNFCCC gives us the international credibility and visibility as an NGO working within the climate space to both attract and manage funding at scale for climate finance. We are already reaching out to our financial partners here to discuss how we could work collaboratively in the climate space. Our new status, notice I'm not leaving that, our new status also allows BPAF as a non-state actor to deepen alliances, to join UNFCCC constituency groups supporting climate justice and women's interests As we know, climate change has a disproportionate impact on women. With increasing calls for greater input by civil society, BPAF could also act as an intelligent mechanism for the NGO community to develop its own position papers and to make contributions to joint statements and interventions, and to gain access to the plenary floor via the constituency groups. Participations in these groups is voluntary, but they provide a conduit for the exchange of official information between NGOs and the UNFCCC Secretariat. In other words, as our government acts through formal channels to address climate justice, or rather climate injustice, and drive climate finance, we will be working with NGOs locally and internationally to mirror and strengthen these same calls and demands for tangible actions and increased funding. The Fund Observer status also provides for global networking for showcasing and advocacy through the press. Through press releases and side events of national and regional interests, showcasing the value of interventions and innovations by Bahamian NGOs on an international platform. So this status is not merely an achievement for the Bahamas Protected Areas Fund, but a catalyst for all Bahamian and regional NGOs. We are out of time, and this is a statement we've heard by our Prime Minister recently, and particularly at COP26. As I stand here and I leave you, I wish to challenge Bahamians and all Caribbean islanders everywhere to join us in this fight for our future. All of us, in every sector, in every walk of life, faith, beliefs, whatever it may be, discipline, can act now in the fight for our continued existence. I thank you, and I turn the floor back over to SPA Nubul.
Thank you, Ms. Panton, and again, congratulations to the Bahamas Protected Areas Fund. It is truly a historical and momentous occasion for them to be given that privilege and that designation by the UNFCCC. As I said, and I've been saying every time we have this press conference, the future rests within the youth and our ability to prepare them and get them ready to continue this fight such that they will be able to be the true inheritors of whatever we leave behind. It's important. Right now, science is indicating that 1.5, that mantra we were saying we need 1.5 to stay alive, the trajectory is now 2.7, 2.9. If everybody stops doing what they're doing that's impacting the climate, we are still on that downward spiral towards those rise in temperature degrees. So it is important for us, for our youth to be fully informed and aware. I take great pleasure in letting you know, Bahamas, that this year, COP27 will see no less than 6 delegates from the Bahamas on the youth platform. They will be participating in the Conference of Youth, which takes place before the conference of the COP happens, and they are now coming well prepared to engage, to negotiate, and to interact with their partners. I want you to meet a few of them. I will now turn the floor over to Ms. Ashante Russell. And just before I do, I want to say that Ms. Russell was an individual that became known to us during our Conference of Youth, our regional Conference of Youth that was held in the University of the Bahamas in July, and she has not stopped since. She has gained notoriety by the United Nations, having been invited to numerous youth events throughout the world since that July event, and was also aware of certain things that were happening even before that. We are so pleased to be able to see from within our own numbers individuals who were seemingly ready and prepared to pick up the mantle and to continue the race. I yield to Ms. Russell.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. I must say, for me, my journey and my experiences with the UNFCCC and the UNDP has been one that I've really gained a lot from over the last 2 years in particular. And to go off of what Director Nubul would have enlightened you about, my journey pretty much started in about 2021 at the Youth for Climate 2021 session. I would have been introduced to this conference really through one of the directors at the Island School as I was a student in 2016. And during that time, I would have served as one of the 2 delegates that would have been given the opportunity to represent the Bahamas at this conference. I'd say I gained a lot of insight during that time because I was not only introduced more so to policy, but the collaborative practices and measures that really have been existing amongst different regions, and in actually being able to see that in real time and to meet with others from the Caribbean region has been something I would say has lit the fire that has continued to burn. This year in particular, I would have gone again to represent the Bahamas at the Youth for Climate 2022 sessions in New York this year. It would have happened, I'd say, the first portion of the Climate Week that would have happened, and it was a smaller scale conference, and it's going to pretty much lead into a larger scale entity as of next year. So it's something I'm really looking forward to participating in again, as well as seeing more Bahamian youth be involved in that process. With reference to the second engagement that I actually left New York to go straight into, would have been an ACE hackathon that happened in Bonn, Germany. And it was pretty much a conference that allowed 22 youth, 15 from the region in Germany, and the rest being from international entities, to actually come together and work in a more collaborative space in which we more so hone down on the specifics of green energy and I'd say green finance to an extent, because we were working on ways in which we can make more collaborative connections between urban and rural communities. I say all that to say that is something that I've really taken more interest in with reference to the Bahamas, because green energy, green finance, climate action, that is something that's pretty much been a platform for me for the last 3 years, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to broaden. So being able to go to COP this year has been a dream of mine for the last 3, I'd say in particular, and it's allowing me to move forward with a platform that I've already been able to start, and hopefully be able to collaborate with a lot of the youth that I was able to meet over the last 2 years and see just how much progress we as a demographic can actually make. As it's been reiterated, we are the inheritance of the situation, really and truly, from the day our generation was born. It's been a mantle that we've been destined to carry. So I'm looking forward to be able to support, to learn, to help, and to better prepare the individuals that will come behind me to take up the fight. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Ashante. I would have also come before you earlier in the year and advised you that there was a competition for all of you students out there who wanted to go to Egypt, that you had an opportunity. You just had to do a few little things. I'm happy to present to you 2 of the awardees from that competition, Ms. Jasmine Cawley and Mr. Delon Evans. Mr. Evans is quite shy, but I'm sure he will well represent the Bahamian men in his intervention right now. Mr. Evans.
Good afternoon, everyone. As stated, my name is Delon Evans, and I will be a part of the youth delegation going to Egypt this year at COP27. Now, let's start with my introduction to climate action. At the age of about 10, I started doing research on the meat industry. After I found out the meat industry contributed to about 40% of all global emissions, it became something that took me by a whirlwind. So I began doing more and more research, and over time I made the decision to go vegetarian, to retract myself from the situation. Although it would be quite small and micro, I said a little goes a long way. So over time I began to do more and more research, and here I am today. COP27, my hope for COP27 is that I will learn a lot more than what I know now, even though I do think I know quite a bit. It would be nice to know more and figure out other people's perspectives and understand their points of views so that we can work together as an international body to fight this crisis that we're facing. Because as stated before, the Bahamas is facing horrible, horrible consequences when it comes to climate change, whether it be flooding, hurricanes, mass destruction, whatever it may be. We're hurting. And it's important that we take the stance now more than ever, because as stated, even if we stop right now and everything comes to us, a screeching halt, the effects will continue on. So working in a timely manner will ensure that we have a better future. And as Whitney Houston said in her song, the children are our future, so it's up to us to carry this mantle. Thank you.
I was afraid he was going to start singing there. Okay. So the final youth individual we want to introduce you to is Ms. Jasmine Colley. Ms. Colley was also a part of our regional youth conference that was at UOB and was also a recipient of the scholarship to be able to go to Egypt this year. I yield the floor, Ms. Colley.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jasmine Colley. I am so humbled to be granted this opportunity to go to COP this year, and it is a wonderful experience. I have been an environmentalist my whole life, and when I saw the competition, I had to do my best effort, and I put my foot forward, and I was successful. And what I would like to say to all of the youth out there when it comes to the climate change. Climate change isn't separate from anything else. Climate change affects the global network, and to COP, every decision made is going to have some impact on the Bahamas. So being able to be to COP, I would be able to find ways and solutions and learn more about what other countries are doing to fight the climate crisis and how some of that can be integrated inside of our communities. Right now, we have been building momentum, and and I'm so grateful to be a part of that. And what I would want to leave, and with all of the youths listening, is that climate change is not separate from anything else. So whatever you have to do, whatever skills you have, you can come in the climate fight. So I would leave an invitation for the youth of the Bahamas and the youth globally that climate change is a fight, and we need to have this fight now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jasmine. So there you have it, folks, a snapshot of the diverse number of persons from a very diverse level throughout the region that are going to be participating at COP. I just want to say, just as Jasmine said, climate change is all-encompassing. Everything, finance, health, education, everything affects climate change. If we stay on this 2.7, 2.9 trajectory, all of us will have to get ourselves up on a boat and try to go someplace else, because you know what? We won't be able to stay here. And that is why it is critically important for us to be at the table, to be at these events, to bring others with us so that our voices can be louder, so the message can go deeper and stronger and be communicated by those of like-minded. So pair to pair, country to country, situation to situation, sector to sector. This COP27, the Bahamas is fully armored up and ready to take on everything that will be presented to us. You will see from some of the news reports that our partners are shifting their stances. They're making some concessions. They're yielding to the demands we've been making for the past 8-9 months. And that it only will occur because we were there and we were harping on them and we were in their ears and in their faces. You will never achieve anything if you are not in the room. That is obvious. They will make their decisions with their own interests in mind. But when they are called and when they are questioned, we don't live on this planet in a bubble. We live on a sphere. And so doing, we all impacted by the work or the attitudes of one another. And when you have a small number of countries contributing to the impacts that is being affected by a host of other countries, it's important that those countries who are being impacted speak up. And not only speak up, but to have a plan of action, to have a purpose, to have a roadmap, to say this is where we want to go and this is how you need to join us. We were so delighted to hold the regional Caribbean heads of government meeting back in August, where our leaders throughout this region, not just CARICOM, but throughout the region, were able to sit together at a table and strategize about what we're going to do when we get to COP. And we are so happy to say that our financial partners were listening and they have decided to take action. And so we will be seeing a lot more moving in this space as it relates to the Bahamas and the region at large. We cannot excise ourselves from what is going on in our region, nor can we for what's going on in the global environment in general. I am telling you, Bahamians, keep your minds, keep your hearts open, and be positive. We are facing this, and we have to face it. It's not going to go away. We can't pretend it's not going to happen, because every time it rains, and we just looked at what was going on in our partners in Trinidad the other day, rivers in the streets, land being washed out, all of that has an impact, and we can't sit here thinking, oh, that is not going to happen to us. It will happen to us. Dorian was our time. Another hurricane is their time. Another tropical storm is someone else's time. But it's all cyclic, and we'll find ourselves in the same vein again. And in order to be able to recuperate from this, in the clip that was shown earlier about the bill the Prime Minister was tabling, it's important for us to make those policy and legislative changes, but then we also need to be able to access the financial resources that are out there globally. When we get our partners to commit to things during these meetings, that means that they have to deliver. And when they deliver, it also means that we must create the mechanisms in order to be able to receive. And if these two things, they're not mutually exclusive, they're intertwined. You cannot ask me for something if I don't have an understanding as to how you're going to implement it, and you don't have a process towards that implementation. And what is critical to all of that is an intelligent, educated populace who will call to order, who will question and ask, where is what you're saying should be happening and is happening? And that's why we seek to educate the youth, who go home and educate their parents, and we do presentations such as these and hold meetings so that we can make sure that you know what we're doing and you can ask us to give proof and evidence of same. We are looking forward, like Ashante said, to COP27. We're going excited, we're going with our minds open and our pens ready, and we have our positions and we have our purposes, and we plan to leave not swinging with an empty hand. So, any questions? I just love it when they do. Oh, yes.
So, how you doing?
Good.
So my question is, how big is the entire delegation and to COP27?
Well, the delegation, like I said, is very diverse. There is a total of about 70 individuals who are going, and we have representation from the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, the Department of Meteorology, the Department of Agriculture. We also have CSO Bahamas. We have various other private sector 4 other private sector companies that are going with us as well. And then we have a large youth delegation that's going this time as well. And to be very clear, there will only be 2 ministers that are accompanying the Prime Minister. One that will be with him, Minister Clay Sweeting will be with him in the first going, and then the Attorney General will be with us during the negotiating phase. Because one thing that people may not have noticed in COP26, everything was negotiated to the benefit of small island states and developing countries until the last day, when India brought in their big ministerial guns and they made that change. So we were like, you fooled me once, but you won't fool me again. And so we will have our big guns there for that second time, such that we will not be able to allow anybody to make that change without due and proper consultations. Any other questions?
How long will they be there? And can you tell us, I guess, some of the specific, I don't know, maybe sessions that they're going to be engaged in?
So the world leaders, all the world leaders will be there from November 6th to the 12th. And these are the gentlemen that will be in the room, and they will be having these discussions, and they will be making concessions and agreements, and they will be coming up with plans that will then be transferred to the technical people, who will then seek to negotiate them into written contractual agreements. The Prime Minister will be there, like I said, from November 6th to the 12th. There's a whole day where we're talking about finance. That's all we're talking about. He will be meeting with his peers in terms of having bilateral meetings, so we could talk with our colleagues such as Japan, where they have a renewable energy technology that we just was there to investigate, and we are very anxious about getting that here in the Bahamas, where we can replicate that in 9 different islands all at once rather than in a piecemeal approach. He will also be meeting with Gabon and Saudis and Qatar for various opportunities to be South-South technology transfer and South-South financial support.
And what's the budget for the trip?
Budget? All those individuals that I said were going, self-funded. Even our youth, we are so glad to have partnered with the private sector, who is able to 100% support all the youth that are going. The government is only paying for its technical members.
Sorry, you mentioned private companies or the private sector coming in attendance to as part of the delegation. Would you be able to reveal who those private sectors are?
Well, they didn't give me permission to call their names. And like I said, some of them, there will be a press conference next week where we'll be talking about some particular technology that some of them are bringing to the table to address climate change, and I don't want to take their thunder.
What is the country's top priority going into this conference?
Climate finance. I mean, as always, the Bahamians' top priority. Our job is to, over the course of the last 8 months, our technical team have been following and instigating the negotiation for new and additional financial resources. Yes, that $100 billion we know was on the table. They have up to $80 billion. They're still looking at ways to see how they can give us the other $20 billion. Okay, that's fine. But let's talk some real hard cash in the reality of where we stand, and that's the new and additional finances. We've all agreed that that is coming. What is that going to look like? We already see countries like Denmark putting aside 13.4 million euros to put towards loss and damage. That is a win, because the issue of loss and damage is something that our partners did not want to discuss. They did not want to have this discussion. They did not want to concede that they were causing the impacts that were affecting us. But now they've opened that door, and now they're willing to have that discussion. We dare not miss this party. Any other questions?
Last question from me. I noticed you said 2 cabinet ministers will be going, but you didn't mention the Minister of Environment. Any particular reason why he's not going?
I don't know if the Minister of Environment may have, there's a reason, but the director for the ministry is coming, along with technical officers too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us and keeping us updated on COP27 and what's the exciting things. And of course, all the best to our young people who are going to be going and representing us. We look forward to your interventions and your contributions as you meet with the world and take the world on. I got a couple of announcements I want to give to you from Prime Minister. Obviously, many of you would have heard about the revenue report coming in last evening. The Ministry of Finance is pleased to release its monthly fiscal report on government's operations for the month of 2022, as mandated by the Public Finance Management Act of 2021. Government fiscal position in August for 2022 resulted in 39.97 million deficit and an increase in the net debt position by $8.0 million. And of course, you can go to the Ministry of Finance's website where they have the full briefing on that latest fiscal position and what is happening with our fiscal records as we account for each month. And then, of course, you would have known that Club Med reopened this week. And earlier this week, you would have seen the first international flight return to San Salvador in 2 years, Air Canada. And then, of course, just today, a flight in from Paris. Some 120 guests came in on that flight from Paris today to the Club Med. And so it is indeed a new day, as Deputy Prime Minister has been quoted saying, Chester Cooper for San Salvador, following the pandemic and the loss of Club Med, the major employer there. Many people are now back to work. Others will be returning to work and moving back to the island to take up employment as the business continues to pick up at Club Med. So some good news there for Club Med. I know a couple of you may have questions. We'll take that before we congratulate one of our other young participants who do well internationally, and then introduce our vendor of the week. And so we'll go ahead and take those questions from you. Let's begin with Berthany McDermott, Our News. Hey, Berthany.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
My first question Yesterday, the Prime Minister said to us that the $24,000 was not the full cost of the trip to Bermuda. What's still outstanding?
I'm glad you asked that. We want to make sure we give full accounting to Bahamian people. I know some people may have been getting annoyed that this is continuously being dialogued. We want to make sure that the Bahamian people understand, and in full transparency, we get the facts for them. Now, as to your question, we're still waiting on the final figures to come in, and that's why the Prime Minister would have said yesterday, whatever is owed, the Progressive Liberal Party will pay as the bill comes in. What you would have seen paid, the check issued, would have been for the airline. And so they wait the bill for the hotel. He is instructed for the Progressive Liberal Party to pay that as well. And so whatever the figures are, he said that in the House yesterday he will release them as they come in, and he's made aware of them. He'll release them to the Bahamian people, and he's well serious about that, making sure there's full transparency with this entire ordeal.
Was this an official trip? If it was an official trip, I guess why was the Prime Minister then addressing political event, and then why would the PLP be repaying the government if this was an official trip?
Very good question, and I want to clarify this so people understand it. Thanks for that, Berthany. First of all, when the invitation was extended, as the Prime Minister would have said, this would have been at a meeting for a cryptocurrency conference that was held coming back from Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles. I happened to have been there when Prime Minister met the Premier of Bermuda, and the invitation was actually extended for an official visit. Prime Minister consented, and plans would have automatically gone in with the technical people who would have been there, permanent secretaries who would have been there to record and say, okay, this is going to happen. And that's why you would have seen Foreign Affairs involved as well, with being there, being on the ground beforehand, because it was an official visit to meet with the Premier. Prime Minister, upon seeing also a part of the invitation was to speak at a political party conference, automatically said, okay, well, this is going to happen. I don't want this to be a government expenditure if I'm going to speak at a political party. So upon leaving, he left on a Wednesday, returned the following day on a Thursday. His instructions were to have the Progressive Liberal Party carry the tab for this trip because we're going to be speaking to political convention. It's not an official duty if you're speaking to political convention, even though there were other items that he would have done in visiting with the Premier, visiting with the Cabinet, that would have been official. He made the decision, just for full transparency, to have the PLP carry that tab. And that's why you hear this kind of, okay, official, not official. Because of that element, the Prime Minister made a decision himself. We're not going to put that tab on the Bahamian people. The party will pay for it.
Who approved the funds, I guess, for the government to pay for it, and how much was approved for this trip?
So it's a part of a process that happens whenever the government, when a Prime Minister particularly travels. I don't want to go into particular as to who and what, because these are public servants who have jobs and so forth to do. I will tell you that there is a protocol, there is a process when the Prime Minister has to travel, that arrangements are made, and you go through the proper channel of making the arrangements. It began, as you would have heard him say, being an official trip. So the normal process of booking trips happened when you do have an official trip. The Prime Minister would have intervened when he recognized that he would have been speaking to a political party, and he said, well, no, let's have the reimbursement happen. That's why you would have heard the discussion as to whether it's untoward or not, or whether any breaches. No, it was the normal process of planning an official trip with the Prime Minister. However, when the Prime Minister recognized that leg of his trip, he made the decision and the determination that his party would pay for it instead.
So, are you able to say how much government approved to spend on that trip?
No. With those normal, the counting happens in the back end, and so we wouldn't have that figure yet. But it's something we can get for you, definitely. Thank you, Berthany. Let's go to Krishna. Hi, Tribune. Hi, Krishna.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
So we hear your explanation of everything that went on behind the scenes, but you have to appreciate that the lines have been blurred somewhat.
Yeah.
Has the Prime Minister said that he is concerned in any way about the optics and the perception that the public may have gotten from this situation at all?
I think he would have proved that yesterday in the House of Assembly. He took time out of the people's business to explain and to give an account. And I think that speaks to his his importance of wanting to make sure people have clarity on what transpired by taking the time in the House of Assembly. And I think that sends volumes as to the importance of the Bahamian people. The Prime Minister has always said his administration will be accountable to the Bahamian people, will be transparent. And that's not just in the good things, that's in things that may appear challenging, things that may appear gray areas. And that's why he would have taken that time out yesterday to explain that.
Italian Council here in the country has said that they have basically turned over everything imaginable to the government concerning the Turin deaths. What's next for the government in this situation? The family of one of the victims has said, you know, we still haven't gotten what we're looking for. We want closure. What's next?
It's something that we want the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to address. They're going to look further into it. As you would have heard, a lot of those inquiries were made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he would have gotten his conclusion, just as you would have seen, and he will determine what course of action, if any, that his ministry will take next. We're going to allow him to be able to meet with his ministry to determine their next move in that, and then he'll report to you on that.
And have we gotten any indication yet when we could see a new U.S. ambassador?
We're all wondering, right? We're all hoping to find out when that will happen. We've made inquiries. We've obviously represented the question and the concern to the U.S. Embassy. They said that they will handle any matters that come before them. They will deal with it directly rather than us addressing that matter. It is a matter for them to respond to from the U.S. Embassy. Thank you, Krishna. Let's go to Kale. Kale from JC, and hi, Kale. You know questions, okay. Devontae, Hannah, Eyewitness News. Hi, Devontae. Any questions?
Yes, sir. So my question is, how often does trips like this one happens, right? Going back to the Bermuda journey, how often does that happen and political parties reimburse the government? And what does the law say about that?
Right. That doesn't happen regularly, right? It's not something that you wonder, well, this is going to happen next month. It doesn't happen regularly. As far as whether or not there's a constant mix of political parties and government, it doesn't happen regularly. As far as you talked about it being...
What does the law say about it?
All right, so we're looking to see, I mean, I've heard people ask, is it against the law and so on, and we're asking, what is the law? You would have heard the opposition leader talk about that yesterday, and we're still trying to ask him what law you're referring to. So if you refer to a law, then we can look at it and see whether what he's referring is relevant, but we don't know about law. We do ask if he's referring to anything particular to say what it is so that it can be looked into.
Management Act. He said if it was in line with the Financial Management Act. So that was going to be my question. Is there a concern that with this whole procedure that the government was breaking the law as he accused them of doing, or did we not know what
Right.
that?
So breaking the law, I can't speak to that because I don't know that. What I can say is, remember the Prime Minister is also the Minister of Finance. And so he has jurisdiction to approve and to make determinations on certain things. In this case, when he recognized there was an element that involves political parties, he made the decision himself to handle the finances from his political party and not to use government. No one asked him to do that. No one suggested that to him. That was his determination just based on what he felt he should do, which many people feel is honorable. As Minister of Finance, he can do that. He didn't have to come and say, okay, it was an official trip. He could have said, yes, it is an official trip, we're going to move on, whatever. He made the decision in transparency. So there will be no doubt or questions of any use of funds that are not quote unquote authorized as many people described it. And so we continue to look at it. He's continuing to look at it because, matter of fact, we're going to perhaps make some suggestions on a number of things going forward that you'll probably hear at next week's press conference. But it's always trying to look and see what you're able to do versus what you're not able to do. And that's why whenever you're not sure or there's a gray area or you just want to go with your gut feeling, you make a move what the Prime Minister did and said, listen, we'll allow the party to cover it so that the people don't have to be concerned of their funds. And I think the timeline will show you that that was a decision he made even before there were concerns from opposition, even before there were reports in the media. The decision was made that the party would pay for it and reimburse the government to make sure that there was no gray area as to whether or not it's okay or not okay.
You mentioned that the Prime Minister wanted to do all of this in transparency, but personally I find it very hard to believe that there was no budget set for a trip. As you mentioned...
Let me clarify for you. I'm glad you asked that, so we can help you with it. The Prime Minister wouldn't set a budget for a trip. That's not his responsibility. He's running the country. He's invited. He will say yes or no whether or not he will attend. He doesn't sit and plan a trip and budget out. That happens in the office. That happens with various divisions, civil servants whose job are to plan and organize. Now, when you budget a trip, you may say, okay, the council department may say, okay, we have to pay for this, pay for this. At the end of the day, when the trip is done, there's a cabinet approval that's given, obviously, for the trip, which will outline that these expenses will have to be covered. But you won't have an exact figure until it actually transpires and you can see what was spent or what was not spent, which normally happens in the back end. That's not unusual. That's how it works in government, in the government system, so you have accurate accounting. If you're asking what was the figure budgeted in advance, I don't know that figure. We can perhaps get that for you. I don't know that, so I don't want to speak unless I know that. We can get it for you.
You mentioned cabinet approval. So was there cabinet approval for this trip?
It was an official trip, yeah.
So there was cabinet approval for this trip?
I don't know. Let me confirm that for you, all right, before saying that it was. That's a process that happens usually with government travel. There are cabinet approvals for it.
Clarification. You are unable to say if there was a cabinet approval for this trip.
No.
But it wasn't.
But that is the process.
That is the norm.
But I want to confirm for you whether or not it actually happened. But that is the process.
Also,
yes.
It's, I think, a week after they would have returned from the trip. There still hasn't been, all of the receipts from the trip still hasn't been turned in a week later?
When you say receipts, what do you talk about?
I asked about how much was still outstanding to be repaid to the government, that we're still waiting to get all the receipts so we can have...
Oh, yeah, that's not uncommon. You're talking about a public service sector, which we're trying to reform and make better. You won't have that a week later. That takes time because you're sometimes still waiting for payments to come in, and so you have to account that way. It doesn't happen that fast. We like it to happen that fast, but it doesn't happen that fast. It just simply doesn't. And so that's why we don't have that. But it doesn't work that fast. It's good wishful thinking, though.
So at this point, we do not know how much was spent for travel, hotel, per diem, transportation, food, all these things that would have been approved before the trip. We do not know that figure at this time.
No, because what happens is when you approve a trip, you approve the trip for travel. What happens is the accounting has to take place in the back end as to who actually went, did they receive per diem, was it actually processed, did you change, was the hotel that was used, was that approved, what was the other hotel, was it another costing? All of that comes in the back end when you deal with expenses for travel because things change, and that has to be done on the back end. Understand as well, for further clarity, when Cabinet approves something, Cabinet approves a trip, they approve the trip and its mandate, not necessarily the itinerary of a trip. And so they may not be aware, and that's why it's, like I said, when Prime Minister found out that there was going to be a component on his itinerary that dealt with a political party, he made the decision to say, okay, the political party will pay for this trip, not government, you see? And so Cabinet approves a mission and a trip, but not items that happen every day. And like I said, when Prime Minister recognized that, there was a need to make a change and make a difference.
Sorry.
I was going to change. Okay, good. So, last week, a teenager would have died, allegedly by a pothole.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't heard from government on this. Is there any response to that at all?
First of all, before we even talk about that, we want to offer condolences to the family. It's tragic. And so our hearts and prayers go out to that family that would have been impacted by the loss of their loved one. As for government's response to it, we're going to defer that to the Commissioner of Police because, of course, it's a road traffic accident. We don't want to get involved in any of the investigation or comment on anything because there is an active investigation. It is, however, a very unfortunate incident. Shelley Lewis, Global Radio. Hi, Shelley.
Yes, Glenn, I can appreciate all that you've been saying with regards to speeding the protocols and the payments. I do have my concerns, and I'm sure the general public also. But one of the other concerns is the seemingly increasing number of targets against our businesses.
Sorry?
Businesses.
Targets?
What is the government's position? Several months ago, they mentioned a number of measures to combat this increase in crime. And we see perhaps almost on a daily basis, businesses are being targeted. And on top of that, they're coming under strain with, the cost of living. Right now, today is the deadline for the price control, alternative. What is the government's position? Many persons are calling for the amendments to the Bail Act, with regards to these armed robberies and murders and everything. What is the government's position? Because it really seems to be spiraling out of control.
It hasn't changed. The government position has not changed. We're very concerned about our citizens and the safety and security of our citizens. It is a priority of the government to work toward that. A lot of what you described are simply tactics that the police force will need to implement. Now, I don't want to speak for them. They're a separate entity, and the Commissioner of Police spoke publicly a few days ago, saying that he will announce some of the strategies that they're going to be employing as we move now into the holiday season, where there's an uptick in business, and as has been the case in our country for so many years, people are doing a lot of commercializing during the Christmas season. So I don't want to preempt anything he will say, but he will, of course, address the crime element and address what is happening. He meets weekly with the Prime Minister. He's briefed weekly. And if there's any incident or thing that happens, he's briefed daily on that. And so he's in constant communication. He knows the Prime Minister's position when it comes to crime and the zero tolerance approach that he says his administration will have toward crime. So the police force have been armed with the position of the government. And the government has made available to them the resources that they need to fight crime. They have the strategy. They've told us they have the strategy. They'll perhaps release more of that. A lot of it they can't because, of course, you don't want to put out there what it is that you're going to do so criminals can know what it is you plan on doing. But there is a plan. And we feel the same way. All of us live here, and we want to make sure that we are safe here. But the police will talk more about their plan and strategy, and I encourage you to talk to them about that.
My other question is from health perspective. I received news reports, and I also experienced it today. The Department of Public Health, medication at the Princess Margaret Hospital. In some cases, there is a deficiency. In some cases, prices have gone up 100%. I know inflation, I think, went up from 7%. Why is it, perhaps the Minister for Health can answer, why is it that a medication that was under $5 yesterday is now over $30 today?
I'm not aware of that. And like you said, the Minister of Health might be able to answer that, and perhaps we can get an answer for him. If you can't reach him, we can be sure to happy to reach him and find out if that is the case, that there is a jump from $5 to $30. What's happening there? There may be a justification for that, but that's something we can find out from the Minister of Health for you. Be happy to do that. All right. Thank you, reporters. I want to now talk about another success that a young person has just obtained. Last week, the reigning Miss Teen Charm competed for the Bahamas internationally in Cartagena, Colombia, where she competed with some of the biggest pageant countries in the world, like United States, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Argentina, and the likes. And she placed fourth runner-up in that international pageant, beating out the likes of USA and Venezuela and Colombia, the host country. And so we want to salute her. She is just one of many teen queens who have been doing exceptionally well internationally. We've had other teen queens who've won pageants internationally. But we're happy that Solange Carter, who perhaps had the largest delegates to compete against those major international pageants, and she was able to come home, and we want to come up so we congratulate Solange Carter, and she can just say a special thank you to all of you, Miss Teen Charm, wearing her fourth runner-up banner as well. And it just shows you that Bahamas is now making a major dent, according to our standards, in pageantry worldwide, with a number of the pageants that are being held worldwide. Come up, Solange, and just greet the Bahamian people and tell them about your experience.
Good day. So last week I was able to travel to Cartagena, Colombia, where I competed against 21 other girls, and I was proudly able to obtain 4th runner-up. And I want to say thank you to all of my Bahamian people for the support, and I am so happy and proud for the opportunity to be a role model for other young girls, as well as I'd like to say thank you to Miss Tia and Miss Mona, as they have made this opportunity and this amazing experience possible for me, as well as to my coach, Miss Chantel, and as well as to Mr. Watson for the support. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations to you, Solange, as you continue to pursue even higher heights. Today, it's time for our food vendor of the week. We're highlighting a prominent business, and many of you know Bahamian business. It's called, what is it called, Devonta? You know it. It's called Bahama Grill. I thought it was behind me. There it was. There it is. How would I know it? It's called Bahama Grill, and it's Bahamian operated. And their food is here. And while they weren't able to be here, one of our press officers is coming up to talk a little bit about Bahama Grill, and then she'll tell you what you're going to be sampling on today. Come on up for me, Atalia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, our spotlight on Bahamian food businesses is no stranger to you. Whether it is their popular corporate happy hour or delicious falling off the bone ribs, Bahama Grill has created a household name for themselves. Unfortunately, due to a super busy kitchen today, they are unable to physically be here, but they committed to ensuring that we enjoy their samples today. So today, they have pork ribs, beef ribs, beef briskets, they have macaroni, a vegetable medley. So a little bit about Bahama Grill. It is a family-style Bahamian-owned restaurant that opened in December of 2009. They are located on West Bay Street, which is about a quarter mile west of Arawaki. They are a full-service restaurant and bar, and their mantra is fresh food fast. They specialize in rotisserie chicken, barbecue ribs, chicken and seafood, lobster, conch, snapper, grouper, shrimp, and all of your favorite sides. They cater to large groups that want to dine in and offer catering services to off-property functions. Weekly, they host a corporate happy hour, and they have a DJ on Fridays from 5 to 11. They have free drinks until 9 for all-inclusive entry fee of $25. So they can be contacted at 356-4745 and emailed at bgbahamas242@gmail.com or on their Facebook account at Bahama Grill. Thank y'all for coming today, and that is our press briefing.
Thank you, Talia. And so, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Prime Minister's press office. We're always here to take your questions and concerns. That's our press briefing for this week. Good afternoon to all of you.